The three-day Battle of Gettysburg will start right here at McPherson Ridge. Now, the main players are Robert E. Lee for the Confederacy and George G. Meade for the Union, but they're not going to be here at McPherson Ridge. We're going to have Henry Heath here for the Confederacy and John Buford for the Union. One story of interest here. So a Confederate general named John Archer was captured by the Union side here, and the guy who captured him was Abner Doubleday, who 15 years after Doubleday died, some would say that he's the man that invented baseball. Now, some baseball historians have since debunked that myth, but to think he was the guy here at Gettysburg. The result of the skirmish here is that Union troops will successfully drive the Confederates back. However, at a great cost, they're going to lose General John Reynolds, and John Reynolds will actually be the highest ranking officer to perish at Gettysburg, and that was still on day one. Just so you know, that's McPherson's farm. That's what the ridge is named for, right over there. Because the Union is ultimately going to win the Battle of Gettysburg. There'll be a lot of monuments we're going to see today dedicated in their honor. But I want to point this one out to you. This is a memorial to the soldiers and sailors of the Confederacy. They will sacrifice more than 3,000 at Gettysburg. Day 2 of the Battle of Gettysburg would be the worst of the three-day event. It involved 100,000 soldiers, and it would see 20,000 casualties. And by casualties, I mean the number of men who were killed, captured, or wounded. Thousands of those casualties would really happen right here at Little Round Top. There's a few things to know about Little Round Top. Most would assume this was the highest ridge in the area. It's actually not, it's the second highest. Round Top nearby is higher, but it's heavily wooded and it just won't make a great place for the soldiers. But Little Round Top, though it's a little bit lower, is incredibly strategic. It's got all these rock formations that you see, which make a great place for Union soldiers to hide. But when one Union engineer showed up, he found that nobody was here. This is the guy behind me. His name's Governor Warren. He immediately sends out word that reinforcements are needed, and they will arrive just in time. Though Gettysburg was the halfway point of the war, sort of, many would feel it was the turning point for the Union to inch toward its final victory in the Civil War. I can't retell the story here, but I do have a personal story to tell you. You know, I mentioned to you that I was born in the South and have lived north and east and west. I'm not sure if I mentioned, but I actually married a Northerner. Well, it so happens then that one of my husband's in-laws was a soldier in the Union Army at Gettysburg. Yes, I have a picture of him. So, the great-great-great-grandfather of my husband's Uncle Bill is Andrew Jackson Deming. Now, he was part of a specialized militia from Pennsylvania. They were formed like 100 years before I was born. Now, this special militia brought together men with sharpshooter skills that were really above and beyond the normal. And to distinguish themselves, these fellows wore bucktails on their hats, and they were thus nicknamed the Bucktails of the 42nd Pennsylvania Infantry. Now, the interesting thing about our great-great-great-uncle is that he claims his team had a significant impact at Gettysburg, really helping to hold Little Round Top. That was a strategic hill in the battle. Let me read to you something that he personally wrote. We are fascinated that we even have this in our possession. So I'm just going to read parts of this to give you his perspective. So he would write, "The old Bucktail Rifle Regiment was hitched onto the left of the 1st Brigade, Pennsylvania Reserves. This was the position of our regiment at Gettysburg on the 2nd of July at 4 o'clock. We remained in this position until our immediate front had got clear of the broken lines of blue coats that were pressing to the rear, closely followed by the exultant rebels, who were yelling and screeching, as none but Rebs could, when the order was given to charge. The rebel line soon gave way, and the tide of battle was changed. When our regiment stopped, it was at the stone wall near the edge of the woods. Our gallant colonel, Charles Taylor, a brother of Bayard Taylor, was killed just after we got across the low marsh ground near Devil's Den. This position we held all night and the next day until after Pickett's charge on our line. Then we had orders to advance, and the whole brigade moved in line, driving the rebels through and beyond the wheat field, thus gaining the whole ground fought over and lost by Sickles' division the day before." He goes on to say, "It has been claimed by some other regiments and their commanders that the Pennsylvania Reserves did not occupy the position at Gettysburg claimed by them. I would not wish to claim any honors won by another regiment, but must insist on claiming and holding fast to all credit given our old division for saving Little Round Top on the eve of the 2nd of July. So that was signed A.J. Deming. I don't know what you take away from that, but I think one of many things is that these were just real people. These were family members of ours involved in this. And it really is all about people. You know, that man survived, and were he here today, I kind of hope he'd know that one of his descendants married a Southern girl, and she would champion that which he ultimately fought for. Welcome to the Devil's Den, named for the fact that a lot of men would die here. It's also called the slaughter pen. So what happened is that after about an hour and a half, Confederate soldiers would secure this location. It's no wonder they wanted it. If you look right over there, up that hill, that's Little Round Top. So from this perfect location, the men here, the Confederate soldiers, they've got these nooks and crannies to make a perfect sniper's nest. They're going to camp out here for day 2 and day 3 of the Battle of Gettysburg. You know today how we struggle with fake news. Well, apparently that's nothing new. It was happening back during the Civil War. So the story is that after the Battle of Gettysburg, there were some photographers who showed up here at the Devil's Den, and they found lots of corpses. They were mainly Confederate dead. And apparently they moved a few bodies around here and there to take better pictures. Isn't it sad? But as mankind, we're kind of have this morbid fascination with death. Remember when I said that day 2 of the Battle of Gettysburg was one of the worst of the 3-day event? That's in part because it's going to include this, which is a wheat field, though they will call it the wheat field with a capital W. That's because 4,000 soldiers will in fact lay down their lives here. And I don't mean they were casualties like wounded or captured. I mean they would fall dead here. One story to know from the wheat field is that this is the place where a Union officer named Harrison Jeffords would die trying to save the flag of Michigan. The story is that before Gettysburg, the Michigan boys had gotten a new flag, and he promised his superiors that he would protect the flag at all costs. And so during the battle, apparently, he would see his beloved flag on the ground. He would see Confederate soldiers about to swoop it up, and so he went in waving with his own sword and protected it. But they would bayonet him to death. So he kept his promise. He died for the flag of Michigan. Still day 2 of the Battle of Gettysburg, there was the peach orchard. Can you see those beautiful lines of trees behind me? So this is where Confederate troops would successfully cut Union troops in half. But it was so gruesome that even 50 years later, here's how one soldier would describe that scene. And I'm going to read this to you from page 60 of the Gettysburg Field Guide. And I quote, "The groans of their human companions, wounded and dying and trampled underfoot by hurrying batteries, riderless horses, and the moving lines of a battle, a perfect hell on earth, never perhaps to be equaled, certainly not to be surpassed, nor ever to be forgotten in a man's lifetime. It has never been effaced from my memory, day or night, for 50 years. So while the battle was raging over there in the peach orchard, there was at least one Union soldier who was standing rather firm here. His name was Daniel Sickles. Now he's a general, and the reason I say he's standing firm is that the story goes that he was right about at this spot when he was wounded in his leg, nearly losing it, so much so that the doctors came and they amputated his leg right about here. They say he didn't flinch during this procedure, which I can't even imagine. Now, adding a little more just awe to this story, this man, Mr. Sickles, would donate his leg to science, and they say that years after the Battle of Gettysburg, he would go visit his leg. Who does that? As we make our way through the battlefield at Gettysburg, I wanted you to see the largest monument here today. This was built by the state of Pennsylvania. Now, this was built back in 1910, and why would the state of Pennsylvania spend more than $182,000 on this monument? Well, for one, it's an architectural feat. You can get up inside of it, you can see for miles around. But second, it's really about proximity. The Union would send more boys from Pennsylvania to this battle because we're in Pennsylvania. The Pennsylvanians will sacrifice 3,000 who will be casualties of the war. Over 1,000 will die. Even though many would point to the victory of the Union troops at Little Round Top as being pivotal to the entire Battle of Gettysburg, others would say that the Union victory right here at Culp's Hill was more important. Here's why. If you had an aerial view of the battle, you would see that Union troops had formed the shape of a fishhook, and Culp's Hill is right here at the barb of the top of the fishhook. So by the fact that it withstood, it really helped protect all the other troops during the Battle of Gettysburg. The story that I have from Culp's Hill is about this guy. This is George Greene. He's a general for Union troops. And the story is that he is the oldest general to serve at Gettysburg. So I don't know, maybe his age gave him some additional wisdom, but he is going to hold Culp's Hill for day 2 and day 3 of Gettysburg, even though his troops will be outnumbered 3-1 by General Ewell of the Confederacy. One can't come to Gettysburg and not see this statue behind me of Robert E. Lee, of course, the lead general of the Confederate Army who hails from Virginia. This is the Virginia Memorial. Now, as many of you know, Lee had just come off of a great victory at Chancellorsville. That was fought just 4 months before the Gettysburg battle. It was in Virginia. Now, some think that it was his confidence, in fact, that drove him here in Pennsylvania, thinking maybe he could win the Civil War here on Northern soil. Well, that didn't happen. Though the Confederates will claim victory after the first day of Gettysburg, Lee will have to spend 2 more years fighting before he'll ultimately surrender at Appomattox. To wrap this up, we need to look at day 3 of the Battle of Gettysburg. So Civil War buffs will call this the high water mark of the Confederate Army. That's because you could say that this last day marked their highest level of achievement before the war would be over. You see, this is what will happen. General Lee is going to send George Pickett and his men thundering across this field behind me. So at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, General George Pickett will begin his charge. Now, what's going to happen is that across this field at Seminary Ridge, this is where the Confederate troops will be lined up. And over here, they're going to shoot toward Cemetery Ridge. This is where Union troops are. It's so easy to confuse the names of those ridges. So one of the problems is that Pickett's men are going to fire this way, but the cannon is going to go too far. The cannon fire, it's going to land behind the lines of Union troops. Well, after 2 hours of this, when the smoke cleared, the Confederates are surprised to see the Union still here, and the Union troops are surprised to see a line of gray uniforms marching toward them. These guys are really on a suicide mission at this point because they're going to march across this field in the last-ditch effort to win at the Battle of Gettysburg. I'm standing at a place called the Angle, which marks where General Armistead and a few Confederate soldiers will in fact break the Union line here. And though they will, they are soon going to be overwhelmed on the other side. Pickett's charge would ultimately be a failure, and many will die as a result. When it comes to studying famous battles like this one at Gettysburg, there's so much more to say, but I need to end this. So let me just say thank you for joining me for this quick trip through the battlefield at Gettysburg, where our nation would redefine and reshape liberty and justice for all. I'm Linda Lacour Hobar for the Mystery of History.